That grocery receipt is not just annoying. It is a little map of how the food system changed while everyone was busy trying to live. Foods that used to feel boring, safe, and cheap now make people stop in the aisle and ask, wait, when did that happen? This matters right now because food inflation has slowed, but the old cheap feeling has not come back. USDA data showed food prices in March 2026 were still 2.7% higher than a year earlier, and grocery store food was 1.9% higher. The same source also shows how wild the last few years were. In 2022, food prices rose faster than in any year since 1979. So this is not just a list of expensive foods. It is a guide to what changed, why it changed, where the tricks are hiding, and how to shop with your eyes open. The 15th food is white bread, and this one feels personal because bread used to be the symbol of cheap food. If someone said basic groceries, bread was always near the top of the list. It filled lunchboxes. It stretched leftovers. It turned eggs into breakfast and peanut butter into dinner. But that cheap loaf is not as cheap as people remember. BLS average retail price data showed white pan bread at about $1.35 per pound in January 2020. By March 2026, it was about $1.81 per pound. That does not sound shocking until you remember this is the plain version, not the fancy bakery loaf with seeds, grains, and a label that makes it look like it was raised by monks. The controversial part is that bread is still marketed like a humble staple, but the shelf has been quietly rebuilt around upgrades. There is the cheap loaf at ankle level, then the better-for-you loaf, the artisan loaf, the protein loaf, the keto loaf, the ancient grain loaf, and the tiny loaf that costs more because it promises not to make you feel guilty. That is not automatically bad. Some people want better ingredients. But the store knows something important. People do not usually calculate price per ounce when they are tired. They grab the familiar shape. They compare one bag to the bag beside it, not to what bread cost in their head 5 years ago. Bread also shows how inflation hides inside supply chains. The wheat itself is only part of the story. Milling, packaging, fuel, labor, store rent, distribution, and energy all ride along. USDA said wheat farm level prices peaked in the first half of 2022 after the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, then fell in later years, but retail bread did not simply snap back to old shelf prices. That is the lesson. Commodity prices can fall, but once packaging, wages, transport, and store pricing reset, the loaf may stay expensive enough to make the old price feel like a memory. The 14th food is pasta, especially spaghetti and macaroni. Pasta used to be the emergency meal. It was what you bought when payday was far away. It was the we can still eat food. But the shock for pasta is not just the shelf price. It is the fact that pasta has become part of a bigger game. The box may look the same, but shoppers now have to watch package size, store brand quality, sauce prices, cheese prices, and whether the sale price requires an app, a membership, or buying multiple boxes at once. BLS retail data for March 2026 showed spaghetti and macaroni at about $1.31 per pound, down from March 2025, which means the current story is not simple, pasta is rising every month. The deeper truth is that pasta stopped feeling like a guaranteed bargain after the last inflation wave. Here is why people miss it. Pasta is cheap in isolation, but pasta dinner is not just pasta. It is sauce. It is meat if you add it. It is cheese if you want it to taste like something. It is olive oil if you cook the sauce properly. It is electricity or gas to cook it. So when pasta goes from nearly free filler to one piece of a more expensive meal, the total dinner changes. This is where grocery inflation tricks the brain. You may look at the pasta and think, that is still affordable. But the full meal can be much higher than the old comfort food math. The 13th food is rice, and rice is one of the most misunderstood items on the list because many people still think it is immune to inflation. Rice is still one of the better values in the grocery store, especially when bought in larger bags. But still a good value is not the same as cheap as it used to feel. BLS retail data showed long-grain white rice at about $1.06 per pound in March 2026, compared with about $1.04 in March 2025. Eggs, chicken, beef, vegetables, oil, sauces, and seasonings. Rice also exposes a controversial truth about cheap food. Cheap staples depend on scale, predictable weather, shipping, and stable global trade. When any of those wobble, a basic food can still be available but feel less forgiving. The cheap pantry used to be built around items like rice, pasta, beans, bread, potatoes, and eggs. But if half of those become less cheap at the same time, the whole budget meal system breaks. It is not one item. It is the collapse of the old backup plan. The 12th food is eggs, and eggs may be the most emotionally charged food on the list. For decades, eggs were the perfect cheap protein. Breakfast, baking, ramen, fried rice, egg salad, pancakes, quick dinner, all from one carton. Then the price went crazy. BLS average retail price data showed large grade A eggs at about $1.46 per dozen in January 2020. They hit about $6.23 per dozen in March 2025, then fell to about $2.35 per dozen in March 2026. That means eggs became cheaper again compared with their peak, but they still taught shoppers a painful lesson. A food can be cheap for years and then suddenly act like a luxury item. The controversial part is how quickly shoppers were trained to accept chaos. One month, eggs were cheap. Then there were empty shelves, limits, restaurant surcharges, and social media arguments about backyard chickens. Then prices fell, and people were supposed to act like the problem was over. But the trust did not come back. When a cheap food becomes unpredictable, families change behavior. They bake less. They stretch breakfast. They stop assuming protein can be solved with a dozen eggs. Even after prices fall, the fear stays in the aisle. The 11th food is ground beef. This is the food that turned weeknight dinners into math. Ground beef used to be the working family's shortcut. Tacos, burgers, meat sauce, chili, meatloaf, sloppy sandwiches, casseroles. It was not steak. It was the affordable beef. But BLS average retail data showed ground chuck at about $4.10 per pound in January 2020. By March 2026, it was about $6.68 per pound. For all uncooked ground beef, BLS showed about $6.86 per pound in March 2026. That is not a tiny change when a family recipe needs 2 pounds. USDA's April 2026 outlook showed beef and veal prices were 12.1% higher in March 2026 than in March 2025, and it predicted beef and veal prices would rise 6.3% for 2026. USDA also pointed to a smaller cattle herd since 2019, tight supplies, and strong consumer demand. That combination is brutal. When supply is tight and people still want the product, the price does not have much reason to be nice. Here is the part people do not like hearing. Just buy cheaper meat is becoming weaker advice. Ground beef was already the cheaper meat. When the cheaper beef gets expensive, shoppers trade down to less meat, smaller portions, more beans, more pasta, more chicken, or more processed options. But that changes meals. It changes habits. It changes what kids think dinner is. And it creates an opening for another trick. Packaging that looks affordable because the total package price is lower, while the price per pound is still high. The 10th food is steak. And yes, steak was never exactly a poor man's food, but certain cuts used to be reachable. A sirloin on sale, a round steak, a small pack for a weekend cookout, a treat dinner without feeling reckless. That version has faded. BLS data showed USDA choice boneless sirloin steak at about $14.12 per pound in March 2026, up from about $11.92 in March 2025. All uncooked beef steaks averaged about $12.73 per pound in March 2026. This is where controversy gets real. Steak is now a status signal again. Not always because people are trying to show off, but because the price pushes it there. A food that used to mean nice dinner at home can start to feel like, why did I not just go to a restaurant? But restaurants are also more expensive because food away from home has been rising faster than grocery food. USDA reported food away from home prices were 3.8% higher in March 2026 than in March 2025, and forecast them to rise 3.6% in 2026. So the old escape route is not really an escape. The hidden detail is cattle cycles. Beef cannot be turned on like a light switch. If cattle herds shrink, rebuilding takes time. A chicken supply problem can recover faster than a cattle supply problem because chickens grow quickly. Cattle do not. So beef inflation feels sticky. Even when feed, fuel, or wholesale prices improve, the retail meat case can stay painful because the animal supply itself is slow. The ninth food is chicken, especially boneless chicken breast. Chicken used to be the practical answer when beef got too expensive. It was the lean protein, the meal prep hero, the buy a family pack and freeze it solution. But chicken has had its own price creep. BLS average retail data showed fresh whole chicken at about $1.41 per pound in January 2020 and about $2.03 per pound in March 2026. Boneless chicken breast was about $4.17 per pound in March 2026. USDA said poultry prices were 1.5% higher in March 2026 than a year earlier, and forecast a smaller increase for the full year. That means chicken is not currently rising like beef, but it is still no longer the easy bargain people remember from years ago. Here is the shopping trick. Chicken breast gets treated like the default healthy choice. So many shoppers do not compare it to thighs, drumsticks, whole birds, frozen bags, or store sales. The industry also learned that convenience sells. Trimmed breasts, thin sliced cutlets, pre-marinated packs, nuggets, tenders, and fully cooked strips. Those products save time, but they can turn cheap protein into premium protein. The more work done before the food reaches your kitchen, the more you pay for someone else's knife, seasoning, packaging, and labor. The eighth food is bacon. Bacon has always had a strange power over shoppers. It is not just food, it is flavor, smell, breakfast, burgers, sandwiches, and comfort. But bacon is also a good example of how people remember a food by its sale price, not its normal price. BLS retail data showed sliced bacon at about $6.80 per pound in March 2026. That was actually lower than March 2025, but still high enough that many shoppers no longer treat bacon as a casual add-on. This is controversial because bacon became a lifestyle food. For a while, bacon was everywhere. On burgers, in salads, in snacks, in jokes, in restaurant upgrades. That popularity helped make people willing to pay more for it. When a food becomes part of culture, the price can rise without killing demand right away. People complain, then still buy a smaller pack. Stores know this. Restaurants know this. Food companies know this. The trick is portion shrink. A pack can look normal in your hand while quietly containing less usable food after cooking. Bacon loses water and fat in the pan. Thinner slices can make the package seem fuller. Thick-cut bacon can make the package feel premium. Either way, shoppers often compare package price instead of cooked servings. Bacon teaches a harsh lesson. A food can become expensive not only because the price per pound rises, but because the amount you actually eat after cooking feels smaller. The seventh food is milk. Milk used to be one of the clearest symbols of basic affordability. Parents knew the price, politicians talked about it. Stores used it as a traffic driver because families came in for milk and bought other things. BLS average retail data showed whole milk at about $3.25 per gallon in January 2020. By March 2026, it was about $4.07 per gallon. That is not the wildest increase on this list, but milk hurts because it is repeat spending. It comes back every week. USDA said farm-level milk prices were lower in March 2026 than a year earlier, and expected farm-level milk prices to decrease for the year. But retail milk prices do not move like a farm chart on a screen. There is bottling, refrigeration, trucking, store handling, spoilage risk, and regional pricing. The cow can be cheaper while the gallon still feels expensive. This is one of the quietest controversies in the store. People often blame the farm or the store, but the cold chain is expensive. Milk has to stay cold. It is heavy. It has a shelf life. It takes space. And stores know milk brings people in. Sometimes that makes it a deal. Sometimes it makes it a psychological anchor. If the milk price feels high, the whole store feels high, even if other items are flat. The sixth food is cheese. Cheese used to be the easy upgrade. Add it to eggs, sandwiches, pasta, potatoes, burgers, tacos, salads, anything. Now it can turn a cheap meal into an expensive one. BLS retail data showed natural cheddar cheese at about $5.97 per pound in March 2026, while the West region average shown in the same table was even higher, at about $6.84 per pound. Cheese is sneaky because people buy it in many forms: blocks, slices, shredded bags, snack sticks, cubes, spreads, and processed singles. The more convenient it gets, the harder it becomes to compare. A block may be cheaper per pound, but shredded cheese saves time. Slices control portions, but they cost more. Snack cheese looks harmless, but the unit price can be brutal. Cheese is where the grocery store turns laziness, time pressure, and lunch packing into margin. The behind-the-counter reality is that cheese is not just milk in a different outfit. It needs processing, aging, packaging, refrigeration, and distribution. It also competes with restaurant and food service demand. When pizza, fast food, frozen meals, deli sandwiches, and meal kits all want cheese, the home shopper is not the only customer in the market. That matters. A food can feel like a kitchen basic while being pulled by a giant commercial machine. The fifth food is coffee. Coffee used to be the cheap daily ritual you made at home to avoid paying cafe prices. That argument still works compared with buying prepared coffee outside, but grocery coffee itself has become much more expensive. BLS retail data showed ground roast coffee at about $7.39 per pound in March 2025 and about $9.61 per pound in March 2026, a 30.1% jump in 1 year. USDA also noted that non-alcoholic beverage prices were rising faster than their 20-year historical rate, partly because of higher global coffee prices. This is where the story gets global fast. Coffee depends on weather in major growing regions, shipping, roasting, packaging, labor, and retail markups. It has grown far from many of the people who drink it every morning. A drought, disease pressure, shipping disruption, or currency move can show up later in a canister or bag. Reuters reported that coffee price shocks can take about a year to fully reach consumers, with effects lasting for years, because retail prices do not instantly move with raw bean prices. The controversial truth is that coffee drinkers are loyal. Many will complain and still buy it because caffeine is not just a treat. It is a routine. It is work fuel. It is comfort. When a product becomes part of someone's morning identity, companies and retailers have more room to pass on costs. Shoppers may switch brands, buy larger tubs, use coupons, or make weaker coffee, but they rarely quit completely. That is pricing power in a mug. The fourth food is orange juice. Orange juice used to be the normal breakfast drink, the thing sitting next to cereal and toast. Now it often feels like a specialty item. BLS retail data showed frozen concentrated orange juice at about $4.89 per 16 ounces in March 2026, up 9% from March 2025. The reason goes deeper than one bad season. Orange juice has been hit by disease, weather, and long-term production problems, especially in citrus-growing areas. Once an orange grove is damaged by disease or extreme weather, recovery is not quick. Trees take time. Processing plants need volume. Juice brands need steady supply. If supply shrinks, the price pressure can last. This one is controversial because orange juice still carries a health halo, even though many shoppers now see it as expensive sugar water. Families used to buy it automatically. Now some people skip it, dilute it, buy smaller bottles, or replace it with whole fruit. That shift matters because it changes breakfast culture. Orange juice went from basic to optional. When a food moves from default to optional, it may never fully regain its old place, even if prices ease. The third food is lettuce and salad greens. Salad used to be the cheap side that made dinner look balanced. Iceberg lettuce was almost a joke for being cheap and plain, but fresh greens have become surprisingly pricey and unpredictable. BLS retail data showed iceberg lettuce at about $1.72 per pound in March 2026, up 17.3% from March 2025. while romaine lettuce was about $3.61 per pound, up 23.4% from the year before. USDA also said fresh vegetable prices were 7.5% higher in March 2026 than a year earlier and forecast fresh vegetables to rise 4.8% for 2026. Fresh vegetables are different from shelf-stable foods because time is the enemy. Lettuce is fragile. It needs water, labor, cooling, transport, and fast selling. If weather hits a growing region, if labor costs rise, if fuel costs rise, or if a crop has quality problems, the shelf price can jump quickly. And unlike rice or pasta, lettuce cannot sit in a warehouse for months waiting for the market to calm down. The hidden trick is waste. A head of lettuce may look cheaper than a prepared salad kit, but if half of it wilts in the fridge, your real price per eaten serving doubles. Salad kits cost more, but they sell because they reduce effort and waste. That is the uncomfortable part. People are not just paying for vegetables. They are paying for convenience, packaging, washing, chopping, dressing packets, and the hope that they will actually eat it before it turns brown. The second food is tomatoes. Tomatoes used to be one of those ordinary foods people barely thought about. Sliced on sandwiches, chopped into salad, cooked into sauce, added to tacos. But fresh tomatoes have become more volatile. BLS retail data showed field-grown tomatoes at about $2.26 per pound in March 2026, up 24% from March 2025. That one-year jump is the kind of thing people feel even if they cannot quote the price. Tomatoes are a perfect example of how fresh can mean fragile. They depend on growing conditions, harvest timing, transportation, and quality control. They bruise. They spoil. They are often picked and handled for appearance and shelf life, not just flavor. So shoppers can end up paying more for tomatoes that still taste disappointing. That is why this food creates anger out of proportion to its size. People are not only mad that tomatoes cost more, they are mad that expensive tomatoes can still be bland. The controversial part is that the modern tomato has been optimized for the supply chain. It needs to survive shipping and look good under store lights. Flavor is not always the top priority. So when the price rises, the bargain feels even worse. You are paying more for a food that may not deliver the taste memory you are chasing. That is one reason farmers' markets and backyard gardens have such emotional power. They remind people that some foods got more expensive while also feeling less real. The first food is chocolate. Chocolate used to be the cheap reward at the checkout lane, the birthday cake ingredient, the cookie mix-in, the Halloween staple, the bad day fix. Now chocolate is one of the clearest examples of how a small treat can turn into a global supply chain lesson. USDA said prices for sugar and sweets were 8.1% higher in March 2026 than in March 2025, and it specifically noted that the increase was driven mainly by candy and chewing gum, a category that includes most types of chocolate candy. USDA forecast sugar and sweets prices to rise 8.1% in 2026. Chocolate is controversial because the package can hide the pain. A candy bar may shrink. A bag may hold fewer pieces. A product may use less cocoa or lean harder on wafers, fillings, air, crisped rice, caramel, or fun-size shapes. None of that has to be illegal or secret to be frustrating. It is the classic grocery trick. Keep the price close enough that shoppers do not revolt, but quietly change the size, mix, or premium tier so the value shifts. The deeper reason is cocoa. Cocoa is grown in specific regions, especially in West Africa, and it is vulnerable to weather, disease, tree age, and farm economics. When cocoa prices rise, the candy aisle feels it. But the retail shelf does not always say, "Cocoa got expensive." It says, "New look, share size, mini, party bag," or limited edition. That is why chocolate makes people feel manipulated. The product is emotional, the package is playful, and the price math is annoying on purpose. Now step back and the pattern is clear. Bread, pasta, rice, eggs, ground beef, steak, chicken, bacon, milk, cheese, coffee, orange juice, lettuce, tomatoes, and chocolate are not all expensive for the same reason. Some are tied to animal disease, some are tied to weather, some are tied to tight herds, some are tied to global commodities. Some are tied to packaging, labor, refrigeration, and convenience. And some are tied to the simple fact that companies know shoppers are busy, tired, and loyal to habits. The biggest mistake is thinking food inflation means every price rises at the same speed forever. It does not. Eggs can crash from a peak and still feel expensive in memory. Bacon can fall year over year and still feel costly compared with the old mental price. Pasta can cool down while the full pasta dinner stays expensive. Beef can stay high because cattle supply takes time to rebuild. Coffee can rise because a shock far away finally hits the shelf months later. Fresh vegetables can jump because weather and spoilage do not care about your budget. The second biggest mistake is trusting package price. The shelf tag may not tell the full truth unless you check price per ounce, price per pound, and servings you will actually eat. A cheaper package can be worse value. A bigger package can be a trap if it spoils. A sale can be fake savings if it forces you to buy more than you need. A premium label can be worth it, but only if you truly value what it adds. Otherwise, you are paying for the story printed on the bag. The final lesson is not never buy these foods. That would be silly. The lesson is to stop shopping from memory. The old grocery map is outdated. Build a new one. Compare unit prices. Watch package sizes. Keep a short list of true staples in your own house. Learn which foods are volatile and which ones are still stable. Use frozen, canned, bulk, store brand, and scratch cooking when they actually save money. And when a food gets too expensive, do not just blame yourself. Some of these prices are the result of big systems that changed long before the item reached your cart. If this helped you see your grocery bill differently, like the video, comment with the one food that shocked you the most at the store, and share this with someone who still thinks grocery prices are all in people's heads.